Hello. So it's been almost 2 months since my last post. For those of you who are new here, I have mild cerebral palsy. I have ADHD, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and I think that's it. I always feel like I'm missing a diagnosis somewhere. In my channel, you'll find a bunch of videos regarding medications that I've tried. I've tried a bunch of antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, ADHD, both stimulant and non-stimulant medication. Some of them have worked out okay. Others have had side effects that are not so pleasant. I have not been on medication now for, I want to say, about 2 months. And part of that was because I was going through transcranial magnetic stimulation for the depression and anxiety. And I wanted to see what the effect of that really was. I think it helped a little, but not nearly as much as I was expecting. But I've also made videos about my TMS journey if you want to check those out. One thing that I've noticed since I've come off my medication, um, I think the ADHD stimulant medications that I was taking that I don't even remember the name of, maybe Asteris, I can't remember at this point. I think it did help me focus, but I hated the way that it made me feel whenever I ran out of medication and I had to, if I ran out on a Friday and had to like contact my psychiatrist to get a refill or something was going on in the pharmacy, and then I would have to be without the medication for an entire weekend, and I just hated the way that that made me feel. So I don't know. I might end up going back on medication eventually if I feel like I really need it, but as of right now, I'm not taking anything. I work full time for two different schools that are under the same charter district. I work as a speech therapist, and I'm also currently in graduate school in the evenings, and virtually. So it's a an extended learning virtual graduate program to get my master's degree in speech and language pathology. I've got about a year to go before I finish my degree. Um, I also have a 10-year-old son. He's about to be 11 on Sunday, actually. So I've just had a lot going on, and sometimes I find that without my medication, I don't know if it's because my medication, like the antidepressants and anti-anxiety, those medications would numb my emotions, but I find that I was better able to deal with the, like, stress levels and anxiety levels that I kind of experience on a daily basis, kind of living this fast paced life where I feel like I'm constantly going and going and I'm always on and I don't really have a chance to turn off. Um, and for someone like me who is incredibly introverted and has social anxiety and all of these other, generalized anxiety, depression, all of these other conditions, it's really difficult to be on all day long, and feel like I hardly have any downtime because even when I get home, I have to like log into my graduate class, and when I'm not in class, I'm catching up on like homework assignments and essays and or reports like IEP reports that I'm behind on for work. So it just seems like there's always something to do, and I'm just perpetually behind. Um, One thing that's been stable though for the past couple months is I have been going to therapy virtually, well, with teletherapy, for the past couple months, and she does a little bit of, I think, like cognitive behavioral therapy, but a lot of that somatic sensory therapy that I talked about in the past that focuses on kind of feeling your emotions, trying to scan your body, and letting out all of that trapped emotion that I have in there. I have a lot of trapped, she calls it like trapped energy or trapped emotions, old fear. Um, and I do think that therapy has been helpful in helping me deal with always feeling like an imposter, always feeling like I'm not good enough, like I don't know what I'm doing, always feeling anxious. always worrying. Anyway, um, I talked about in my previous video about how I had to talk in front of parents for a special presentation that the special education department was having, and the SPED department, or the special education department, which of course I'm part of as a speech therapist, and that it was going to require me to go up in front of people and talk about myself, and I was dreading it. And my therapist was telling me, you know what, you don't have to do it. It's not really part of your job. The meeting is after hours. It's at 4:30 when I'm supposed to be out of work by 4. You can tell them, because I did express to them that I had a really hard time speaking in front of people, that I have like really, that I have anxiety. They know all this already, and they didn't seem to want to accommodate that in any way. It's almost like they didn't give me a way out. They didn't say like, oh, they made it sound like I don't really have a choice, like I have to do it. But my therapist, on the other hand, said if you really don't want to do it, you don't have to. You're an adult and you get to protect yourself and you get to make that decision, right? I was really debating on whether or not to go. I ended up going for, I was only there for like less than an hour because I had school stuff to do afterwards anyway. So I couldn't stay for the full 2 hours. But uh, it was in the, they call it the multi-purpose room, or the MPR, which is essentially the cafeteria, and they had a table by the back door, which is where the parents were coming in through. And as they came in, we had to give them like a little name tag and a marker for them to sign their names on their name tags. We had to give them, they had to sign in on a sign-in sheet. And because for this particular school, we have a high population of Spanish only parents. It is a Title One, low income neighborhood that I live in, and it's close to my house. Um, and so a lot of the parents are Spanish speaking only. And surprisingly, a large portion of the special education team does not speak Spanish. So it's a couple of us, and a couple of us, like probably less than a handful that I could name, that speak Spanish. So it's myself, bilingual. Spanish was my first language. My the other SLP, which is the lead SLP, she also speaks Spanish. The special education director, right? The SPED director, he speaks Spanish. Um, and then I don't know if I can think of anyone else. Any of like the RSP teachers or SPED teachers that speak Spanish, a lot of them don't. So because it was just the three of us in the room at the time that were fluent in Spanish, and the lead SLP who works with me was actually in charge of translating the entire meeting through these headsets and translating device that was being provided to parents. And she was kind of in the back, and she was translating the meeting as the SPED director was up in the front directing the, talking or having the actual meeting. I'm at a loss for words. I am so tired. Anyway, as the SPED director was up in the front, getting the whole presentation started, the lead SLP was like in the back room translating, and so that kind of left me and another one of my coworkers who is an RSP teacher in charge of greeting the parents and telling them to sign in, and kind of directing them to where to go. So I was the only other person at that table then that spoke Spanish. So I was in the back as the presentation was already going on, and the other members of the team were introducing themselves one by one as the SPED director went through the PowerPoint slides. And then when it was my turn, and I had already spoken to my SPED director in the past and told them how uncomfortable I was with having to go up to the front and speaking in front of people. When it was my turn to speak, I guess that he saw that I was kind of busy, all the way in the back of the room greeting parents, and he called my name. And then I also have cerebral palsy, so uh, moving around for long periods of times or extended time, like walking, can be difficult sometimes, even though I try to push past it because I'm super out of shape and I want to get in shape. Anyway, he called my name. I was in the back room. Everybody else was going up and talking about themselves in front of the parents. But he saw that I was in the back, and he just kind of said, "Do you just want to present from there? Do you just want to talk from there?" I'm like, "Sure." So I think this helped because then I was able to lean against the table, and everybody kind of had to turn and look at me. But some of the parents weren't. They weren't going to turn their seats to look at me. So I felt like not everybody was looking at me, and I felt more comfortable in the back room for some reason than I would have been if I had to go up to the front of the room and present. And I just kind of quickly, it was maybe 30 seconds, said my name, and I said that the reason why I joined the special education team and the reason why I became a speech therapist was because I was born with cerebral palsy. And so I grew up kind of on the receiving end of special education services, and I had an IEP plan, an IEP my entire life, and I wanted to help support um, and to help support families that were like mine growing up, and work with kids who had communication difficulties. There was so much more that in my head I wanted to say. Like, I wanted to say that I grew up with a father who stutters, but he is also a singer and he's a musician and he's incredibly talented. And I grew up with a mom who is hard of hearing and she's basically lost all hearing in her, I think it's her right ear, and how difficult it was for her to have to grow up with that hearing loss. And for a lot of the time, she would rely on reading lips because she didn't have hearing aids up until recently because she wasn't eligible for health care here in the US up until recently. And when she finally got those hearing aids, like, it was just a relief for her to not have to rely on hearing aids. And I have nieces and nephews who are on the spectrum, and some of them are nonverbal. So all of these reasons why I decided to become a speech therapist. I couldn't say any of that because I was so nervous, so I kept it short. I felt my face, I felt myself flush and turn completely red while I was speaking, but I introduced myself, and I think that's a pretty big win. Even though I spoke for maybe 30 seconds, it felt like 3 hours. Um, and that was that. So I talked to my therapist, and she said she was proud of me for um, doing it, even though I didn't have to. But for some reason, it didn't feel like a win to me because I feel like I didn't say really everything I needed to say. And that's the problem with me that I've noticed, that like I'm too harsh on myself instead of like being proud of my accomplishments. That just never feels like enough. Um, but that was one thing that I wanted to talk about. Um, what else did I come on here to say? Um, oh yeah, asking for what I need. So I have been drowning in like IEP paperwork, uh, classwork, and everything. I have just been overwhelmed. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, that having a full-time in-person job is incredibly draining for me. I feel like I'm masking throughout the day. I don't like not having my own space because I have to share the speech room with two co-workers of mine who are absolutely amazing, but it just doesn't help that I'm incredibly self-conscious and I have huge imposter syndrome. And I think it would be helpful to have my own speech room, but like space has always been an issue in that school. So um, I just got to a point where I would come home recently and cry and be really irritable. And there was an incident where the the smoke detector in the dining room hadn't been working for a while, and my dad swapped out the batteries, and I guess that's what was wrong with it. And then he put it back up, and I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I have a really exaggerated startle reflex, and I will jump and startle at pretty much any sudden noise, any sudden physical contact. Like if you come up behind me and tap me on the back, I'll startle. Um, I think it might have something to do with cerebral palsy. I've done some research. I've read that there's a connection. But anyway, my mom was cooking and I was talking. We were talking about, I can't remember exactly what, but she was cooking and I was sitting there in the dining room talking to her, and the alarm went off and I jumped and I got so angry and irritated and frustrated, and I said, I can't be here. So then I took my coffee, which I was drinking, and I went to the office. And she called me. She's like, "Oh, I opened the door so that I could let some of the smoke out, and I'm done cooking, so the alarm shouldn't go off anymore." And I said, "No, I don't want to be there." And I was just angry, and I started crying, and I was crying, and I was angry at my mom, and I was angry at the smoke detector, and I was angry at the fact that I startle so easily. And it just seemed like a huge overreaction for one little thing. And because of that, my dad basically took down the smoke detector and said, well, we don't want her startling, which I don't think is safe. But um, when I brought this up to my therapist, she said, no, that was likely a stress response because you're going through a lot. And it seems like you're starting to have a mental health crisis and you need to cut down on what you're doing. And I said, I agree that I'm going through a lot, that I'm doing too much, but I can't cut down right now because in 3 months I have to quit my full-time job so that I can do an unpaid clinical internship doing exactly what I'm doing now, but for a different school. And it has to be unpaid because those are just the university's rules. They won't let me do my SLP internship in the school that I've been working at or anywhere that I've worked at previously, and they won't let me get paid for it, which is ridiculous. But I have to do free unpaid work for an entire year, and that's going to start in about 3 months. So I think May 30th is my last day of full-time work. And I said, I can't cut down on work. I can't cut down on any of my classes because the program is already set. I'm with a cohort, and my university's SLP program, they pick my classes for me. They already have a set schedule that I need to follow in order to graduate in the spring of 2026. And we don't get to pick if we only want to take one class or two classes or what have you. So she asked me, is there anything else that you feel you can do um, that would help cut your level of stress, cut down on some of the stress that you're feeling? And I said, well, right now I think we have about a caseload of about 110 kids at one of the campuses that I'm working at. And I'm seeing about 50 of those kids, and the lead SLP who works with me is seeing the other kids. And the special education director, he had been talking about how he's trying to contact a vendor. He's trying to work something out with a vendor, so a contract company, so that they can bring on SLPs who provide treatment virtually via Zoom. There's a bunch of contract companies out there, like VocoVision and Eluma, just to name a few that will hire SLPs on a contract basis. So he's trying to work out a deal with one of those vendors to bring on a virtual speech therapist to help with some of the excess numbers, the excess caseload. Um, and so last summer, I did an internship with my university, and it was done via Zoom. And even though it was a lot of work and it was stressful, I felt like my stress levels were significantly reduced when I was working via Zoom. And I think part of it is like I'm working in my room from home. I don't have to deal with small talk or, you know, things about working in the school that really frustrate me, like having to go to all staff meetings when I'm trying to finish a report. At the end of the day, when I'm done with my sessions, I have maybe an hour sometimes that I can use to just wrap up my session notes and work on reports that need to be completed. But no, I get interrupted because I have to go to the cafeteria to join an all staff meeting that has little to nothing to do with the special education department most of the time. And this is time that I could be using to catch up on the insurmountable amount of paperwork that comes with being a school speech and language therapist. So that's one thing that annoys me. Other things that I know are necessary when you're working in a school, that I don't like dealing with, are things like fire drills and lockdown drills, um, small talk in the hallway, not having my own space or my own room to just kind of decompress, and having to be in the same room with two of my coworkers all day. And sometimes there's like three speech therapy sessions going on at the same time. It's all these little things that are really frustrating and overstimulating to me, that add up, that maybe like a normal adult that doesn't deal with all these things, like mental health difficulties that I deal with, maybe they don't think it's a big deal, but like to me, like these little things really add up and significantly increase my level of stress. And I feel like if I was working from home, like a lot of SLPs do, I wouldn't have to go to the dumb all staff meetings. I wouldn't have to deal with like small talk. I wouldn't have to, do the lockdown drills or the fire drills. I could just use that extra time to decompress. Like I would have my own room because I'm in my own space. So that's what I told my therapist. I'm like, if I could work virtually or at least try it for a while, I think that would be incredibly helpful. And she said, okay, then bring it up to your supervisor and see what they say. So I wrote an email. I had ChatGPT help me phrase my email, um, talking about like how have been talking to my therapist. I've been significantly stressed, and um, but I want to continue to support them, and that I know we've been talking about bringing on another SLP, like a contract SLP, to help virtually with the excess caseload. And I, you know, told them that I would like to take on that position if possible, working from home, but continuing to support both campuses. Because mind you, I work at two campuses, right? They're connected under the same district, and I don't even drive. I have to rely on my parents for rides. And one of those campuses is 45 minutes away from where I live. Um, Last year, I was working at that campus 3 days out of the week. So I was commuting back and forth 3 days out of the week. And my parents would just like 4 trips, right? So they would drive 45 minutes to drop me off. They would drive 45 minutes back. And then when I got out of work, they would drive 45 minutes to pick me up, and again 45 minutes. Just this year, I'm only working at that campus for 1 day a week, but it's still a lot. And the other campus that I'm working at 4 days a week is nearby. It's about 10 minutes away, so that one I can't complain too much about it. But still, there's the fact that I do not drive. I don't drive. So all of these stressors, I just I don't know. I wrote an email, and I have mentioned in my previous video that I've never disclosed to any of my coworkers that I don't drive, because I've always been like ashamed about it, and I don't know, I just didn't want to talk about it, because part of me knew that this job required an itinerant SLP who could go back and forth, and I took the job knowing that, and my parents agreed to support me, and that way I could help them financially by helping them, pay their mortgage, and I live here, and it all works out. So I wrote this kind of long email to my supervisor explaining that I wanted to go virtual, and that it would just work out better, because instead of having to drive up to that campus that's 45 minutes away, then I could just see all the kids that I see in both campuses, but I could do it virtually, so I could see some of them in the same day, and this would just work out better for me as well. And basically, he forwarded the email to HR, and he set up a meeting with one of the ladies that work in HR, who I've heard about her, but I've never like met her in person. And I come in, and she's kind of sitting at her desk, and again, I have social anxiety, so this was incredibly difficult for me. She's like, "So what's going on? Can you tell me what's happening that's making you want to go fully remote?" And there's a lot going on, right? I was like, "Look, I have a lot going on. I'm dealing with mental health difficulties. I have depression, anxiety, ADHD." She's like, "Oh, you don't have to disclose any of that." I'm like thinking to myself, like, okay, yeah, I do. Like, if you want the full picture and you want to understand why, I'm telling you like what it is. There's the whole thing with the driving thing, and I don't want to get political, but my parents are currently working on getting their status here in the US legalized. But it's a long process, and with a new administration in office, they don't feel safe, because no immigrant who is working, even if they're working on getting their status legalized and they're in the process, they're really not safe. And I'm not even going to go into detail about why that is, because I don't want to make this a political video, but it is what it is. And the fact is that if I don't want to make them go out and drive me 45 minutes either, I don't feel safe for them. It's just the whole thing. And I mentioned this to my SPED director before we met with HR. So the three of us met with HR last week, me and my SPED director and the HR lady. And when I mentioned this whole immigration thing with the driving thing and my parents, I said, I didn't know if I wanted to disclose that or not, because it's very personal. And he said, now is the best time to disclose it. Anyway, so fast forward a couple days, and we met with HR. And my SPED director was there. And he basically said, we're here to talk about an email that I sent requesting to work remotely, you know, due to stress and other factors. So when the HR lady asked me what's going on, what's happening, I told her, look, I have all these mental health conditions. Last year, I did a summer internship where I worked virtually, and my stress levels were significantly lower. And so it's something that it's something that I want to do, right? And I didn't bring up the whole immigration thing with the driving thing either, because it felt too personal, and it didn't feel right to bring it up to HR. Although, you know, my therapist told me last week when I met with her that it would be a good idea to bring it up, but it didn't feel right. Um, I guess my mental health struggles weren't good enough for a reason, because basically the response that the HR person gave me was, "Oh, that's, that doesn't align with our vision. We really believe in that face-to-face interaction with the kids." And I'm over here thinking, then why are you looking for a contract SLP who can service the kids virtually? But I just didn't even want to go into it, right? Oh, and I said, I understand, but I just want you guys to know that, that's what I'm looking for. And in a couple months, in about 3 months, I'm only going to be able to support you guys twice a week, because I have to do my internship full time. And if I could do those 2 days a week from home, that would be a huge help for me, because eventually that's what I'm looking at, at transitioning to, just virtually full time. And I would love to be able to do it while still continuing to support the district. And basically she said, I don't blame you. A lot of people have gone that way, especially after COVID. She said, I would probably do it if I could too, but that's just not something that unless it's a medical reason. As she said that she has approved virtual work for like employees who have gone through surgeries and stuff like that. She said she has approved it temporarily, but never long term, to where like there's no end in sight. And I didn't want to, I had already disclosed to her that it was more of a mental health difficulty, which I see as a medical reason, but I don't think she saw it that way. And she said that there would have to be all this paperwork and reasoning for them to look into even approving just a temporarily work from home situation. And it's just, in my mind, with everything that I have going on right now, it's not even worth the struggle. And basically I said, I understand, and then she said, basically, and in the future, she said, if that's what you want to do in the future, then, go for it, do what's best for your family. We would love to keep you here with us. We love having you here. I have never met this lady, but that's what she says. She says that the SPED director's feedback, about my performance as a speech therapist has all been positive. But basically, they kind of shut the door on the whole working from home thing. Um, and that was that. And it was really awkward. And then when I got back to my room, because this was when this was on a day that I had to work at the campus that is 45 minutes away, that I told you guys, I only work at once a day now, once a week. And in that campus, I actually have my own office, which is nice. So when I went back to my office, I literally cried. I cried because I felt so stupid for even requesting to work from home. Um, and I felt like I don't have the adequate social skills or people skills to really try to self-advocate for myself. And I felt like that was so dumb. Why did I even do that? It was a waste of time. Um, but I don't know. I think that it's just me being my own worst self-critic again. And tomorrow I have an appointment with my therapist, and she's probably going to tell me the same thing. Like, it wasn't stupid for you to ask for what you needed, even if they said no. So I guess I just have to keep doing what I'm doing for the next 3 months. Working full time in person at 2 school sites, dealing with all the overwhelm and the overstimulation of everything, and try not to fall behind on schoolwork. And then we'll see where we go from there. Anyway, this video is getting really long. I think there was more that I wanted to say, but I can't quite remember what it was. So I will probably be back later. Okay.